The terrifying sights and sounds of the EF-2 tornado that touched down in Seminole County. It's something people who lost their homes won't soon forget.
Unlike anything, like a freight train.
And the whole house shook.
It's just shattering glass.
You were taken through some of the worst of the damage in this video that we're showing you. People are now cleaning up from the massive destruction.
And hearing from the experts, our weather team and the National Weather Service break down how this tornado formed and how you can prepare for any severe weather.
West 2 News Sunrise on CW18 starts right now.
Good Tuesday morning, and thank you for joining us. I'm Meredith McDonough.
And I'm Jason Guy. We thank you for starting this Tuesday with us.
And today we are expecting the National Weather Service to release a full report about the tornado that tore through multiple Seminole County communities.
And meanwhile, people in the Longwood neighborhood are going to be working to clean up after this home was demolished. Look at this. West 2's Bob Hazen shows us the damage in the Whispering Winds neighborhood off Markham Woods Road.
The early reports that the wind was over 100 miles per hour, possibly up to 120. That's what came through and tore down this house and damaged several others in the neighborhood. That is doorbell camera video from one house here. The tornado came through just before 10 a.m., ripping roofs off of homes. Trees were torn out of the ground. Shingles and other parts of houses just sprayed all over the neighborhood. And one house, this one here on Blue Iris Place, was wiped out. Almost nothing left standing. And we talked to another man who said even though his house is still standing, every room in his home except for one was damaged when the twister came through. He said all he and his wife could do was duck and cover.
I cannot exaggerate. I mean, like, everything happened so fast. The flower pot, they just came from the door and hit my back. I mean, like, literally, I felt everything. I was just saying, like, try to protect my wife. That's all I did.
He's not sure yet if he'll have to tear down the whole house or if it can be repaired. And that's something that a lot of folks are going to have to figure out over the next couple of days. Surprisingly, though, most people in this neighborhood did have power overnight. Duke Energy says only 12 customers did not have electricity in the early morning hours, and they were working to get everyone restored. Covering Seminole County, Bob Hazen, West 2 News.
And last check here, because we've been watching the electricity numbers, power in that area has been fully restored. We also want to bring in First Warning meteorologist Kellyanne Class, because we're expecting a report in the day ahead from the National Weather Service. They're going to really give us the full breakdown on what we saw in this tornado.
And yesterday evening, we talked to Will Ulrich. He is the warning coordinator meteorologist at the National Weather Service's Melbourne office. He explained how his team figured out what scale the tornado was.
The one thing that happens when we do storm surveys is that we have to realize we don't have direct observations from the ground in terms of weather instruments that tell us how strong the wind is. So what we have to do is we have to let the damage tell the story. And so a lot of what we do when it comes to determining the strength happens after a tornado has impacted a community. So in this scenario, what we did was we went out and looked for patterns of the damage. In other words, is it lying in different directions? How far was the debris carried away from its original location? And then what type of damage was occurring? Was it to softwood trees, hardwood trees, well-constructed homes, poorer constructed homes, more vulnerable homes, things like that? And the neighborhoods that we toured today were very well-constructed concrete block and wood structure homes that offered some insight into the level of winds that we saw with today's tornado.
Okay, it was remarkable. They told us EF-2 and possibly up to 120 miles per hour, Kellyanne.
Well, that's just the estimate, right? Like, that's just the preliminary data. We're waiting on the actual data from the National Weather Service. They just look very briefly, a short-term look, but they're going to really dive more into it and look at other things that have happened. They're looking at radar images, things like that. So hopefully that report comes out soon. I know a lot of us have been waiting for it.
And we're talking here about 24-plus hours since the tornado moved through Seminole County. Is it normal that on the very day, within hours, someone from the National Weather Service will get to that site and survey the damage on the ground?
You know, I will say it is relatively normal, but I would say that was probably the quickest response that I have seen, especially because they are in Melbourne, in Brevard County, right? So to get from Melbourne to Lake Mary in such a quick amount of time, it's not rare for it to happen, but it's not uncommon either.
Yeah. It's just interesting to hear everything that goes into it, though, the debris field and just all the different things that you have to look at, the structure of the home, how well constructed is it built, Kellyanne. So all those things, though, you know, now you realize, like, what happens there and how they figure out how big this thing was.
There originally was the Fujita scale, which was just based on estimated wind speeds, but now the enhanced Fujita scale is based on the damage. So they estimate the damage on how, or they estimate the wind speeds on how much damage there was, essentially. So that now there's an EF scale instead of just the F scale.
Gotcha. All right, and we are in Florida more accustomed to hurricanes, so we wanted to hear from Will about how people should treat these storms differently.
Today's winds of 110 to 120 miles per hour in Longwood are actually equivalent to a Category 3 hurricane. However, the big difference is with tornadoes, they're very short-lived. And so what we see often is very hyper-local areas of damage like what was experienced today. Look at the homes to the left and right of where you're standing. I was out there earlier today. There were only a couple of homes that were actually impacted. And if you look at the home to the left and right of the one that you're standing in front of, they still have their roof. So that speaks to the locality of these tornadoes and how hyper local they can be, where one street experiences incredible amounts of damage and then right next door that doesn't happen. That's very different than a hurricane, which has an expansive wind field and it lasts a lot longer, so damage builds up with time. Whereas a tornado like what we saw today, 30 to 60 seconds can make all the difference in our neighbors' lives.
Kellyanne, so many questions about this. Not too far from that location where all this happened, you know, in that area of Seminole County. And that's what's incredible. You have so many neighbors saying, hey, how's your neighborhood? How's your neighborhood? Because, you know, one is completely fine, but then that location, man, it just looks like, you know, a war field almost.
Yeah, I mean, we had the house that was almost completely demolished, the one right next to it only losing a roof. So these tornadoes, while yes, they only impact a few houses, we are talking about someone's house, right? Their lives that could potentially be lost. And happy to say yesterday there were no actual confirmations of any injuries or anything like that, which is great. But exactly like Will said, with hurricanes, we're talking about a widespread field, but with the tornado, it is so localized. That's why we always get down to street level when we're doing tornado coverage.
You can't believe it. Just the next one over looks completely fine. You know, it is. It's wild to see that.
It is. And a tornado comes in so fast. For a hurricane, sometimes beyond days, we may be for a week or more talking about this potentially impacting us. So we talked to Will about that alert that people got there in Seminole County. And our first warning weather team had been talking about the potential that we could see tornadoes for days and days. And that morning show, Kellyanne, you said wind's going to be the issue. People rushed to safety, and that was, Will says, likely what saved lives.
When it comes to tornadoes, seconds can make all the difference. And folks only need a couple of minutes to get to that pre-identified storm shelter. Get away from windows, get away from doors, get into the most interior room in your closet. And when it comes to tornadoes, unlike hurricanes, where we have days and days to prepare, tornadoes only offer up minutes, if not that. And so the fact is, we need to know where to go whenever a tornado might happen, because this time of year, as you said, is our peak tornado season. So whereas June, July, August moves into our peak hurricane season, this is the time of year where some of the most prolific tornado outbreaks have happened in our community. Think 1998, think 2007, when we saw lots of strong to violent tornadoes within our communities. Luckily, this was just one, but obviously it had a significant impact within our community, and we're grateful that everyone heeded those alerts and no one was injured today.
Brings up a good point. I feel like for hurricane season, we're always so on top of it. And yesterday, you guys were so on top of it, our weather department, but you've been talking about it is our severe weather season, but I feel like sometimes people are like, wait a minute, we're in a severe weather season. So Kelly, what is it right now that makes it severe?
Yeah, it's the cold fronts that move through, and our severe weather season is a little bit earlier than the plains, which I feel like a lot of people know, okay, the plains always get severe weather during the springtime, but for us, it's more like February, March, April, instead of the March, April, May that the plains have, and it's the cold fronts that bring us the severe weather. There's enough ingredients to where we could have the tornadoes spawn, especially on the edge of that cold front, and that's exactly what we saw yesterday.
Yeah, it
Okay,
sure is.
interesting.
Yeah, well, and we thank you, Kellyanne, for giving that first warning, and to our team of meteorologists. You can learn much more about that EF-2 tornado, and we're going to be posting information as we learn it from the National Weather Service as it moved through Seminole County and how to prepare for future storms. Just go to WESH.com, download our free mobile app to get alerts about severe weather coming your way.